Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on One India as the countdown to the all-important inauguration of President Trump comes closer. Both India and United States are watching the developments with a bated breath, and not just these two countries, but also I would say the whole world. And to discuss the matters which are important and which will weigh heavy on everyone's mind, it's our pleasure to have Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, South Asia analyst for Eurasia Group, and Raymond Vickery, former United States Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development and Senior Associate at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out for One India. Mr. Vickery, I would like to begin with you first. Given the scenario as of now, given the times that Donald Trump is coming into power, how do you perceive his approach to global trade? And do you think that his emphasis on America first could lead to protectionist policies, and it could have its ramifications on others as well?
Well, thanks very much for having me, Pankaj. It is indeed a big day tomorrow, and the U.S. and the world, as you say, are waited with bated breath to see which Donald Trump will emerge, because what he says is not always what happens. On the question of international trade, the most worrisome part about it is President-elect Trump's infatuation with tariffs. He seems to think that tariffs are a one-way advantage for the United States, that somehow the foreign exporter pays for tariffs and there's no impact on the U.S. Of course, we know from experience that is exactly opposite to what happens. It is, in fact, a tax on the American consumer and has geopolitical implications as well. You can't expect to put tariffs just across the board, particularly on friends like India, and think there won't be any effect on the relationship. Retaliation, of course, is the first that one thinks about it. And it goes on from there. So it's very concerning. I suppose the only brighter spot in it is that in the past, we've been able to work around these kinds of tariffs, thanks in part to the Biden administration, the Trump tariffs, which were put on steel and aluminum in regard to India, in fact, did not materialize in the way in which Trump had envisaged them. And there are things which are in train now, particularly on the new and emerging technologies, the so-called ISET in the defense area. There are commitments in regard to how we would conduct our chip manufacturing initiatives, both in India and the U.S. Right. So those things are in train, and hopefully they provide some ballast, which will make whatever Trump does and not as bad as it may seem on the surface.
Right. From it, what we hear as of now from our eminent guest also, for Donald Trump, do you think, and how do you conceive this? How do you see this? His unconventional leadership style, could it influence U.S.-India ties? Could the transactional approach to diplomacy create opportunities or challenges for India in areas like, say, trade, defense, and technology cooperation?
So yes, Trump, as you've mentioned, has a very personalized style of diplomacy. A lot of it depends not just on the broad his broad worldview, which some of which Vickery has already described, but it's about how he perceives leaders, individuals in the government, even countries as a whole. So we know, for example, that he's an admirer of Vladimir Putin. So that means not that he won't necessarily be tough on Russia, but he comes to thinking of Russia with the idea that the person in charge is somebody I can work with. What we do know, he seems to like Modi. He has been almost consistently praised Modi whenever he's spoken about it in the campaign during his first presidency. We know that his family, his inner circle, are positive about India, if only because we have more Trump towers built and coming up in India than any other country in the world besides America. So they have a vested in, if you wish, in India. So, and then he happens to have a remarkable number of Indian Americans in his inner circle, within his policy circle, and a lot of tech entrepreneurs, many of whom are of Indian origin, or many of whom see India as very much part of their worldview. So you put that all together, it's been reasonably positive. He has been critical of India on only one issue, tariffs, and trade protectionism. He has also been critical of many other countries. He does not seem to have any territorial desires on India, unlike as he has with Canada, Panama, and Greenland. So on both fronts, I think we are in a good spot with him. What is important to realize is that what has happened in the first Trump administration, his team was perfectly normal. I mean, his foreign policy team, whether it was Tillerson, Mattis, and so on, were very clear to the Indian side. Look, just keep the president happy about India overall, and we will see that the policies that we work out bilaterally go through without any issues. And that's more or less what happened. And if you look at people like Mike Waltz, Mark Rubio, that he's bringing into his foreign policy and national security team, if you look at their past record, their statements out of office, they have been extraordinarily positive about India, that the Quad is on the level of NATO, that India is exactly the kind of strategic partner and military partner that America wants. So on a whole host of fronts so far, we have no reason to be very concerned.
Right. Indeed. Raymond, I'll just quickly pick up from where Pramit has left. So, in your opinion and in your knowledge, how do you foresee US-India strategic relationship evolving from the present times, and particularly in terms of defense cooperation and counterbalancing China's influence in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, I think there's no question that the relationship between the U.S. and India vis-a-vis China is going to continue to grow. China, after all, claims an entire Indian state, Arunachal Pradesh, as well as other portions of Indian territory. In the South China Sea, they are building up facilities which impede the free passage of shipping in the high seas. So we have a very common interest in that regard. I note, for example, on the issue of TikTok, India already banned TikTok, and without really any terrible deleterious kinds of consequences. India has shown, in my view, the way on that. Trump, on the other hand, feels that TikTok would be of benefit to him politically, and therefore he's diverging from his original stance on it. And therein, it seems to me, lies the problem. The problem with the Trump foreign policy vis-a-vis India is that it is not just America first, and it's really Trump first, and first, last, and only. And if he sees some advantage to him in terms of, for example, his quest for a Nobel Peace Prize vis-a-vis China, it's not very likely that he's going to say, well, international rules-based considerations and considerations of the UN Charter are going to keep me doing whatever I think is appropriate. So I think that's a real difficulty Another difficulty, of course, is what happens with international trade organizations. The WTO, for example, has been of benefit to India in terms of tariffs and working these things through. WTO will play virtually no role, in my view, as will many other international organizations. And of course, we have the whole existential question of climate change and what happens there. The United States needs to work with India, but it also needs to work with China. So how's he going to square that circle with his stated beliefs that China is an aggressive country operating outside usual norms?
Right, absolutely. In fact, Donald Trump's new friend, I would say, considering the string of events that have happened. Elon Musk today tweeted saying that if Twitter is banned in China, then it's only justified that TikTok is banned in US. At least tit for tat situation there. From it, still staying back at home, Trump's presidency has been marked by a focus on recalibrating alliances and a more assertive stance against China. We have seen that before also, be it the COVID times, with the tariff issues. How do you see this impacting India's foreign policy strategies, especially in the context of the Quad that you mentioned and also the Indo-Pacific?
So the team that he's put together are largely China hawks. They're people who are extremely clear or public in their view that China represents America's primary strategic rival.
Okay.
A position that I would say India shares. At the heart of the Quad, and it's important to understand what the Quad is about, is a belief among the four governments that are involved that China's real game is China does not seek military confrontation. It doesn't believe that that's the sensible way to it still be wary of getting involved in a fight with all four, or even with the United States by itself. But they believe that the heart of their future dominance, if you wish, is via being the number one, should we say, leader in strategic technologies, whether it's quantum computing, AI, green hydrogen, pharmaceuticals, that if they do so, if they are the number one, or they are the control the supply chains for these, they will inevitably be, all the countries of the world will have to come to them. So therefore, there is no need to necessarily build up military capacity, though they are doing that as well. But you really need to do is be building, being the sort of the superpower in technology, of future technologies in the world. And the Quad is basically I would say, a sort of multilateral response to that. If you look at the roughly 30 working groups in the Quad, 26 of them, I think, are technology. Trump raised the Quad, he resurrected it in many ways when he was president. Biden took it further to a summit level. And now the question we'll have to see is, what does Trump's plan for the Quad in the next 4 years? How far is he prepared to go with that? And I think the problem that we will face is that if you saw what Biden had announced, for example, at the bilateral at Wilmington, Delaware, was that America would seek safe and secure supply chains, which would be defined as basically supply chains with no Chinese control or inputs in pharmaceuticals, in green technology, in semiconductors, that they would work to build up Indian capacities in defense. And if you go back further to an earlier summit, that they would integrate their supply chains in these areas with India and other areas. That required, however, that some of the manufacturing, or a lot of it, would have to be done in India. That it would be India's capacities that we built up. It would be American money or contracts that would help build that up. If you were sort of small Marshall Plan for Indian technological capacity. Now, Trump is an America first person, and I think his instinct would be, why aren't we manufacturing these in America? And I think we saw our foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, recently in Australia saying we must brace ourselves for an America that, while strategically aligned to India, is a little less generous than the Biden administration was. So we'll have to see how far what Biden had developed or placed on the table, how much of that will survive, or will it have to be modified, if you wish, for the next 3-4 years.
Right. Thank you there. I'll take one last question from both of you. Raymond, this is the second time that President Trump is assuming the office at the Oval Office. From his previous presidency to this presidency, what couple of pointers would you suggest him that he should or should not do in this current presidency?
Well, I think that in regard to U.S.-India relations, he has to modify this transactional approach. This idea that I'm going to get something for me out of every little thing that happens. That is not the way to build this relationship. The common strategic, economic, cultural, and indeed values interest of the two nations go beyond making a deal on every particular thing which comes along. So I think that he needs to change that approach. He needs to learn something more about the capabilities in India in regard to technology, in regard to space, for example. And he needs to have this broader view that indeed will build a relationship rather than send it into one step forward, a step back, and uncertainty on both sides.
Right. Absolutely, Raymond. And, I'll like to know from Pramit that there's a huge diaspora. The Indian diaspora who lives there also forms a very, significant part of the economy and the electorate, the voter also. Pramit, your take on their future aspirations, I would say. How do you view the Indian diaspora and its existence in the Trump era? Once again, I would say H-1B visas, spouses, right to work or not. Lots of things still there on the cards for the Indian diaspora on the whole there.
So the Indian diaspora in America is now the largest diaspora we have overseas that actually has citizenship in the country that they live in, and the fastest growing. It continues to grow. It has not yet. That growth has not been really affected by any presidential policies in America. And it traditionally votes about 2/3 Democrat and 1/3 Republican, but its money is often split 50-50 because wealthier Indian Americans tend to vote Republican. And in this election, if I'm correct, I'd have to check the numbers, but I think we saw a 60-40 split, in which a little bit more shift towards Biden, towards Trump. But I think that, as you mentioned, there are a number of issues for them. One is the India relationship. I think that's going to be a major source of concern. Immigration will be an issue. Students, I don't think, will be affected. America is quite open on that front. And in fact, as Chinese students are increasingly leaving or not showing up in the United States, Indians are now, if I'm correct, the number 1 or number 2 foreign student population in the country, and rising rapidly to fill that vacuum of Chinese students not showing up. H-1B is a bit more complicated. If you look at Trump's personal statements, if you wish, there's the political Trump who's basically ranted against migrants, immigrants, but largely over illegal migration. That is the touchstone of the Republican position. We have no problems with migration, but they must come through legal channels. The illegal migration is largely coming out of Central America. There are about 400,000 Indians who came by that path, but the vast bulk of them, several million, have come from Latin and Central Latin America. So that is the primary political focus of the Republicans and of Trump. The deportation policy that he's almost certain to announce tomorrow, for example, will be aimed at this group. The question about legal migration, he has gone on and off saying, I support legal migration, I don't have a problem. He's also said students who graduate in America legally should be allowed to stay and get citizenship.
Okay.
Even in his first administration, he imposed no restrictions on H-1Bs until the last year when he was campaigning, and it became an issue. The problem that H-1B has now in America, I would argue, that it has become contaminated, if you wish. It's being gamed by what are body shopping firms. These are not the big ones, TCS, Wipro. These are small companies that use this to some degree for illegal migration, to help migrants rather than produce highly skilled workers. And maybe as much as 50% of those visas are now coming through this process or through these structures. So I think when Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy fought with various other Republicans about this policy, Trump's response was, H-1Bs are fine, but the system has to be reformed. And I think that's where you're going to see the focus of his policy, that we have to make it genuinely about highly skilled workers. The debate about what the wives and the path to citizenship, unfortunately, is being completely blank. There's nobody's talking about that, given the strong emotions on immigration right now. But Indian government, I don't think, has any problems with blocking illegal migrants. That's simply not something it would support anyway. And cleaning up the H-1B visa, if that was particular system, would again not be a matter of concern, especially if it were to be combined, and we'll see whether Trump has that vision, with something about spouses or an easier path to citizenship. That combination would be perfect for India and Indian Americans.
Right, Pramit. Thank you so much, Raymond. Thank you for speaking to us. And to both of you, I would say that not just this panel, but also the world, as we discussed, is watching with bated breath. I believe in less than 24 hours, Raymond, Capitol would be welcoming the 47th President of the United States. All the very best to you, your team, your family members, and your countrymen. Pramit, thank you so much. Pleasure to have you here. We hope to connect with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Don't miss out. Log on to oneindia.com for more updates.